Hi everyone, it's Megan from Tiny Orchard Quilts, and today I have a really quick tutorial for you. Really more of an idea than anything else. I have been sewing my bindings down with these great big chunky stitches, and I just think it's so much fun, especially on a really bright quilt like this. This is Tula Pink Zuma fabric with Kona chartreuse, and I put this fun striped border on it, striped binding on it. And I decided to use this really bright hot pink thread, and this is Aurifil 12 weight. This is what I use for all of my big stitch hand quilting, as well as sewing down these bindings with these big chunky stitches. So I just wanted to take a few minutes and show you kind of my method. It's very similar to traditional hand binding, so this will be real fast. I've prepared this binding opposite of how I usually do it. Usually I stitch my bindings down to the front and flip the binding over and hand stitch it to the back. But because I wanted these stitches to show, I've stitched it down to the back and then folded it over to the front to do the hand stitching. And I think it's just so these can show. I did it the regular way on my previous quilt, and I was kind of sad that I didn't see these cute little stitches. So this time I'm doing it reverse. So I have my little clover needle minder with Aurifil 12 weight already ready to go. And these are the Clover Gold Eye embroidery needles. And this is kind of my favorite needle to use with this thread. Now to start, I do, I think it's usually like an embroidery knot, but I just kind of clasp the thread with the, clasp the needle with the thread behind it and wrap it 2 or 3 times. And then you just kind of pinch the knot, slide it over the eye, and slide it all the way to the end. And you end up with this nice tight little knot really close to the end of the thread. And it's just a nice, simple knot. It's really fast and easy to do. Now I'm coming up to the corner here, so I'll be able to show you the corner as well as some kind of regular stitching. So I come up from behind the binding to begin. And that allows me to kind of tuck my tail down in there. And then it's basically the same as a normal stitching. You come up straight above where your thread came out, dip in to just the backing of, well, in this case it's the front, but just through one layer and some of the batting. You don't want to come all the way through the, oh, look what I did right there. You can see one of my little pink stitches. So be careful of that. That's what you want to avoid. You don't want your binding stitches to show on the other side of the quilt, but I'm not going to fix it. It's fine. No one will notice. It'll be our little secret. So you push your needle in, grab just the backing fabric and some of the batting, and then come up about, what is that, like 1/8 of an inch? Now you can vary the size of these stitches. If you want them smaller, you could come up like 1/16 of an inch away from the edge of that binding. I'm doing about 1/8 of an inch. And then you just pull your needle through and it creates that big chunky stitch. Now for the corner here, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to duck in straight above where my needle came out, but I'm going to come up kind of right at that miter so that I can do a couple of little stitches through the layers of the binding corners to hold them taut. And I try to go through the binding, some of the backing, and then the other corner of the binding here. And this just helps hold the miter really nice and tight. Now I don't mind these little stitches because obviously I'm going for a look where the binding stitches are showing. If you don't like this look, you could really carefully kind of whip stitch the insides of this miter down and then continue on with this side of the binding corner. Now I have my little stitches here. this is just the tail of that thread. I'm gonna tuck that back down in there. Sometimes it's easier to do with the eye of your needle. It's a little bigger. There we go. Now, because I'm working with a striped fabric for my binding, I'm doing a stitch at the meeting of the two colors and then once again in the middle. And that's just, you know, for the sake of my pattern. But you just want some nice regular sized stitches. They don't have to be any particular size, but I would say 1/4 of an inch or under, just so your binding stays stable. Now, I've never had a hand stitch binding pop apart on me in the wash, so I hand bind almost all of my quilts, even though I know a lot of people think that machine binding is a lot stronger. I've never had a problem with it. So that's it. You just take larger stitches than you normally would, coming up further into the binding than you would, like if you were doing a traditional binding, you would go in and you would try to come up like and just catch a little bit of that binding so that your stitches barely showed. But now we're gonna come in about 1/8 of an inch away. And that's it. You would continue to bind as normal. I obviously have lots of thread left, but I'll show you how I bury my ends. I go into the backing where I normally would, but I kind of fold my binding down and come up on the other side of the stitching. The stitching line is where you attach your binding to the other side. And I take a small stitch, and then I go through a couple of times, pull it taut, and trim it, leaving about 1/4 of an inch or so. And then you can just kind of tuck that tail in, and then in the next stitch you'll, once you rethread, you'll come up in that new position. It's just a really different look. It's a cute little accent to your quilt. Obviously, you know, it's not for every quilt, but it's certainly a fun variation if you are looking for something different for a quilt. So that's it. Quick little super fun tutorial. If you have any questions, let me know. I don't think there's any like particularly crazy supplies or anything involved in this. You'll just need a little bit bigger needle to match your bigger thread. And that's it. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.